Today we are going to paint one of the cups of this amazing reference image. The links to the reference photo and the line drawing are in the description box below. The pigments we are using are cobalt blue mixed with burnt sienna for a cool grey, cobalt blue with alizarin crimson for a cool violet, transparent gold deep, burnt umber, alizarin crimson, burnt sienna, and also sap green and viridian. So first I used a kneadable eraser to soften the pencil marks. Using the wet on wet technique, I applied a glaze of water, then took some cobalt blue and applied it all over the cup. The paper I'm using is 100% cotton paper, but it tears easily with masking fluid. However, it is very good for lifting colors. So that's why I'm not using masking fluid in this painting. But if you prefer using masking fluid, then please go ahead. Just make sure that your paper can handle masking fluid. I took my round brush number 10 and started applying the cool grey in the darker areas of the cup and the cool violet in the lighter areas of the cup. This is all wet on wet, so we have to apply all the colors that we want to apply before the paper gets dry. So you see, it's very important to take your time to properly wet the paper because this will give you more time to work later on. On the base of the cup and also on the base of the handle, I applied more of the cool grey. So I applied more cool grey on both the left and right of the cup where there were darker areas. And then I applied more of the cool grey on the area on the right side, just next to the bright highlight, but without covering the small flower at the bottom. Then I used the same brush to soften the edges. A very dilute cobalt blue near the top edge of this side of the cup. Then I took some cool grey to apply on this left side of the cup to somewhat recreate the random shadow shapes, leaving some areas of highlight. Then I did the same thing on this right side of the cup, first capturing the larger shadow shapes and then going for the small ones. Now the shine on the paper has gone, so it's perfect timing to do lifting to create the highlights. So I took my damp brush, removed the excess water, and then carefully lifting colors in the areas where I saw in the reference photo bright highlights. I lifted color alongside the handle so that it would look shiny later on. On this right side, there's a strong highlight, so I'm lifting color there. It's a very important highlight. And also on the edge of the right side. Here I applied a little more of the cool grey to darken the shadows. So while the paint on the cup is drying, I applied a glaze of water on the saucer. Then I took some burnt sienna and burnt umber on the central area of the saucer because the wooden table beneath is reflecting its color on the saucer. Now I applied the cool grey on the whole of the saucer, carefully leaving out the pencil outline on the left so that light could shine through this area. Please drop me a like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. This greatly helps me to reach more people on YouTube, and I deeply appreciate your support. Thank you very much. Then I applied cool grey with a thicker consistency at the base of the saucer. Now that the first base layer is completely dry, but before we move on, I wanted to show you this artwork which I made a couple of months earlier. I love it, but it doesn't have a background, and then I painted it again in my favorite size and now with the background. The point is, if you find it overwhelming to handle several colors in one wash, you can first apply the layer of cobalt blue, let it completely dry, and then apply the rest of the colors. This is exactly what I did with these two artworks. Now let's get back to the tutorial. Now I applied a glaze of water on the inside of the saucer and then dropped in cool violet in the shadow areas and then cool gray on the darker shadow areas. Dropped in some cobalt blue for visual interest. Now I use my damp brush to move the color around and soften the edges. Then I also dropped in some cobalt blue on the left side of the saucer. And now that the paper has lost its shine, I use my brush to lift colors. Here on the rim of the cup, I applied 3 different colors: transparent gold deep, burnt umber, and sap green. First I applied a dilute transparent gold deep in the whole of the rim except the small area in this edge. Then I applied burnt umber here and sap green here. After applying a glaze of water, I applied a dilute transparent deep gold all over the handle and then took some burnt umber for the top of the handle and in the middle. And when the shine of the paper was gone, I started lifting color for some highlights. Now I applied a dilute transparent gold deep all over the edge of the saucer, leaving some white of the paper showing here and there for the highlights. Now back to the handle once again. Taking a small amount of burnt sienna, I created the shadow areas on the top part of the handle. For this I laid down the paint and then used my damp brush to spread the paint around and soften the edges. Then I took my 000 round brush with a thick consistency of burnt umber to outline the bottom of this part of the handle. Then I used a slightly damp brush to soften the edges. Due to the perspective from which we are looking at the cup, the handle almost looks flat. So in order to avoid making it look flat in our painting, we have to carefully build in all those small details on the surface and around the base of the handle so that it tricks our brain to think that this area has some depth. Now I took some thicker consistency cool gray that I mixed earlier to create those wrinkles or lines that suggest the base of the handle. And then I applied small amount of burnt sienna and blended it around, leaving the center area with the transparent gold deep showing a little. The handle is the most challenging part of this painting, so please have patience and take your time to create these details, although you don't have to recreate all of them to achieve realism. With my round brush 000 and a thicker consistency of cool gray, I created the small lines below the lower part of the handle and on either side of the top part of the handle. Then I applied some more of the burnt sienna, and with my damp brush I softened the edges and spread the paint around. There are 2 strong reflections on the lower part of the handle. For the one at the bottom I used thicker consistency cool gray, and for the top reflection I used sap green. Now it's time to paint the small flower details on the cup. Although I have sped this up, but I hope you can see. So I took Alizarin Crimson for the top flower. For these small flower details, I'm using my 000 round brush, using Viridian with Cadmium Yellow for the leaves. And then for the white flower on the right bottom side, the transparent gold dip for the center of the flower, and the cool gray for outlining the flower petals, and repeated the same color for the leaves. Viridian mixed with cadmium yellow. Reinforcing some of the colors on the rim of the cup, and then I applied burnt umber to create shadows on the edge of the saucer. They are mostly on the inner lip of the saucer and below the lip. Then I took some cool gray, thicker consistency, applied it around this area which depicts the line that goes all around the cup. Then use my brush to soften the edges. Now it's time to paint the table on which the cup and the saucer is placed. So for this, I'm using the wet on wet technique in only one layer. The colors that I'm going to use are burnt umber and burnt sienna. Keeping in mind that the saucer is casting a strong shadow on the table, I apply the colors on this right side of the saucer and also on the left side of the saucer. I left some white paper showing to depict light coming through. Don't worry if some color accidentally bled into this area. You can use a damp brush to remove them. Then I took some more of the burnt umber, thicker consistency, to apply at the base of the saucer. For the background, I used both sap green and Viridian and Alizarin Crimson to mix with Viridian to create neutrals. Green and red are complementary colors, so they create beautiful neutrals together. To create the bokeh effect in the background, we also need a stencil and a sponge. Usually I paint flat on the table, but for the background I will put this box under the paper on one side so that with the help of gravity all the paint and water would flow in this direction away from our cup, and we can just remove the excess moisture with the tissue paper. So after applying a glaze of water, I started dropping in colors on the background. Sap green, Viridian, but I'm careful to apply or very light colors or no color at all near the table and near the edge of the cup and the saucer. If any color bleeds into an area where you don't want it, just use the damp brush to lift it. And if you see any hard edges forming near the outlines of the cup, saucer or the table, gently use the damp brush to soften them. Now that the background is still wet, I used a tissue paper to remove moisture before it accidentally entered the painted area. So after about 10 minutes, I checked with my stencil and the painting was dry, but not bone dry. To create bokeh effect, I laid down the stencil and used a very slightly damp sponge to lift color. Here I'm using my fingertip to protect the edge of the cup. Once you're done, take off the excess moisture with the tissue. Repeat the same process wherever you want the circles to be. Make sure to create circles of different sizes and some of them overlapping each other to create a more natural look. I hope you have fun painting this piece. Thank you very much for watching till the end. Please like, subscribe and share if you haven't already, and I will see you next week with a new tutorial. Bye for now.